Raise your hand. That's all right. We're gonna set up some sort of recovery group for you. But we call it Transformers, but what we're really talking about is not the little guys that change into cars or the cars that turns into little guys, but God's components, the things that God has available to us for changing our lives. Change is rarely easy, and even the simplest of changes almost always results in some great difficulties. Changes that we as individuals or groups of people attempt can take hours, days, weeks, months, years. We're not a patient group, but change is hard. This past week, I had been hearing ads on the radio about a special business packages available with your phone service. So I thought maybe we could save the church a little bit of money. So I'll just call the phone company and see if we are able to do any more bundling. Because if we could do some more bundling, we might be able to save some more money. So I called, and of course, I listened closely because their options have changed. But finally pushed the right button, 0, and talked to a live person. I have to be on hold for a little bit because all their operators were busy. They were experiencing more density in the calling, evidently because of the bundling. So I talked to somebody, and they looked at our account, and they found that they could save us $35 more a month, and it wouldn't change anything. So a couple months ago, I had called them, and I got $20 off. So I'm thinking I'm up to $55 off a month. That's good money. I'm talking $630 a year. So I said, well, let's just do it. We walked through it, and they gave me a confirmation number that I needed to write down as reference for my account. I was so excited. When I got home that day, that was Tuesday, I dialed a little bit later to get our messages that come into our voicemail. But it didn't recognize me. It said, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you said. Well, I didn't say anything, I dialed it. But they didn't understand. So I thought it must be me. So Wednesday I came in and I tried it from the phone here. And it didn't work. Then someone called me and said, I called the church office and the phone just rings and rings and rings and rings. Uh-oh. So I called them back on Friday, and I listened very closely because their options have changed. And I pushed finally the right button. After being on hold a little bit, I got a hold of a live person who did not understand why we had had such a problem. But they reviewed our account and saw that the original individual had messed up everything. And we no longer had voicemail or other services we were entitled to. So they fixed all of it and gave me a new confirmation number and promised me, but by the end of business on Friday, everything would be back to normal. So at the end of business on Friday, you know what I did? Dial the number in. Put in your temporary password. I have no temporary password. They didn't give me a temporary password. So I was going to call them, but they close at 5 on Friday. So tomorrow, I'm sure the dance will begin. Oh, wait, it's Columbus Day. So I'll call Tuesday and I'll listen closely because their options have changed. All I wanted to do was to change a little tweak on my phone, save a few dollars, and now we'll have a wonderful time, I'm sure, Tuesday. The kind of transformational change, though, that you and I need is much more difficult than getting the phone company to push their right buttons and file the right electronic forms. What we will need to happen to us involves radical heart transformation, and that's a God thing. We as Christians are blessed because God has provided all the necessary components for real change in my life, for transformation to occur. Let's see what God has provided for us as we think through God's components for changing our lives. Remember, we began last week with a maximum impact vision statement. Individually and as a church family, we strive to be a people who are experiencing such a powerful walk with God that it radically impacts our lives. The lives of those around us, and ultimately our community, our city, our culture, and our world or our cosmos. We said last week that transformation is not simply about education, not simply about reformation, not simply about imitation, not simply about motivation. That transformation is a work of God accomplished in us, in our hearts, that actually changes who we are from the inside out. We're going to look at 5 simple components that God is involved in that produce for us change. Component number 1, the intervention by the living God. God is at work with reference to me. He's at work from the outside in. In Philippians 1:6 we find this promise, and I am sure of this, or I am confident of this, or I am persuaded of this, that he who has begun a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. That's a great little song, right? He who began, it's a good song. The who here is God. The what is a morally good work, a beneficial work, and where is this done? In or among you, it's inside of you, from the outside, as it were. The how, he's going to complete it. He's going to bring it to completion. God finishes what he starts. The when, he's going to keep doing it and bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. He's going to keep working on me and you until we get where we're supposed to be. And you know what? Sometimes I don't like that. God keeps working on me even when I don't want him to work on me. God actually works in areas I thought were okay. I would like him to work in other areas, thank you. But no, he's working in areas that I thought were fine. Whoa, I don't have a problem there. If you've got time for that, why don't you change so-and-so? I mean, I'm fine. Secondly, he works from the inside out. Philippians 2:13 says, "For it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure." God not only works from the outside in, making me more like Christ, making me who I'm supposed to be, transforming me, he works from the inside out. Here's the fact of the work. It says, "For," and that tells why. It's from the verse before that says, "Work out or demonstrate your salvation with fear and trembling." Well, why should we do that? Because God is continually working in us. And that word working is the word we get energized from. I don't know about you, but sometimes I get tired. I get fatigued of changing. I get tired of putting out the effort to change. I think, you know what? I'm going to take me a week off from the whole change thing. I'm going to take me a month off. In fact, this summer is vacation from change. I got me a change Sabbath going on. I'm going to stay the same old rotten person. Why? I'm tired. God never gets tired. And he provides the energy in me to change. It is God who is energizing me. He is working in me continually, both to will and to do of his good pleasure. The idea of will is he's fixing our attitudes. To do is fixing our actions. And here's perhaps the great statement here. He's working in you. Did you know that the God of the universe, if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, lives within inside of you? He walks in you to do his will and to do his good pleasure. The end of his work is that we will please him. It's about him after all. We labor to be well-pleasing in his sight, but he is working in you and I so that we might be pleasing in his sight. Remember our first point here? The first component that God gives to change us is his intervention. God is involved in changing you, and he never takes a day off. He never takes a second off. He is always at work. God is more interested in my spiritual growth than I am. And he never gives up. I mail it in sometimes. Oh, I'm doing the right thing. I'm where I should be. I'm close enough. I'm better than so-and-so. God is never, 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 never stopping his work in me. Always, always, always. You got up this morning, God had a day planned for you where he was going to intervene and help you become who he believes you're supposed to be. And everything about today has that in mind, and God is at work. God is at work. Think of it this way. I ought to anticipate that God is at work in my life. I shouldn't think it's accidental. God is very purposeful. God is at work in my life. Remember this verse, Romans 8:28 and 29? Oh, we love Romans 8:28. And we know that for those who love God, I'm reading from the New English, Alan, you got to get with it now. We know that for those who love God, all things, I said all things, I said all things work together for good. For those who are called according to his purpose. I got an amen, right? But here's why. For those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. Why do all things work together for good? Because everything that happens in my life is transforming me, moving me to be more like Jesus Christ. This week you had trouble paying your bills. Why do I have trouble paying my bills? To help you to become like Jesus Christ. This week you went through some difficulties with some people at work. Why? Why do I have to go through difficulties with people at work? So that you can be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. This week you had an argument with your spouse. Now, I know it didn't happen to anyone here. Why? Why, Lord, did you give me this man? Why, Lord, did you give me this woman? So you can become more like Jesus. This week there were struggles in school, struggles in work, struggles in life. Why? Why? To become more like Christ. So God is intervening every moment of every day to help me to become like Christ, and he never stops. So when you walk out of here today, remember that your life is not a haphazard situation that has nothing but accidents, but it is a purposeful situation that God has preordained to help you to become like Jesus Christ. Walk that way. Think that way. Secondly, though, is the involvement of the whole person. God wants all of me involved in this stuff. I love this statement from Max Anders in his book, 30 Days to Understanding the Christian Life. He says, God does the work of God. Man does the work of man. Man cannot do the work of God. God will not do the work of man. Uh-oh. We want to sit somewhere and say, God, zap me. If I could just, would you zap me? Because I really want to be like Jesus. I don't want it to hurt, though. Don't zap me with no hurt stuff. Just zap me so I'm okay. Or, Lord, I'm going to run forward today and have the preacher touch me. I'm going to pray with 4 people today. I'm going to have them hold hands, and we're going to sing Kumbaya, and I'm going to be different. It doesn't work that way. That is the start often of change, but that is not the end of change. That's the beginning, but it's not the end. God wants us to be involved, all of us, in this process. It begins with a calculation on our part. It says in Romans 6, 11 and 12, so you also must consider yourselves dead to sin. and alive to God in Christ Jesus. Let not sin therefore reign in your mortal body to make you obey its passions. What it's basically saying here is, in a polite way, is there are two voices. And you don't have to obey the one, and you can obey the other. Before I was a Christian, every morning I got up and I reported for duty. And I said, sin, what would you like me to do today? How high would you like me to jump? What are the lies you'd like me to tell? How would you like my mouth to run itself today, sin? What do you want me to do? But I don't have to obey sin's voice anymore. I am dead to it. Now, that doesn't mean I don't choose to obey it. I don't have to obey it. I don't have to do what sin says to me. I do not have to be, it's not my master. I've been set free. So I must calculate that I am dead to sin and alive to God, and that sin no longer is to reign in my mortal body to make me obey its passions. I don't have to do what it tells me to do. But here's my commitment. Do not present your members to sin as instruments for unrighteousness, but present yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and your members to God as instruments for righteousness. Now in the morning, I stand before God and I said, how do you want to use me today? I am yours completely. Where do you want me to go? How do you want to use my hands? How do you want to use my feet? How do you want to use my mouth? How do you want to use my ears? How do you want to use my mind? I am yours. What do you want to do with me? But the involvement of the whole person is there. I anticipate God's work because God intervenes. But now I also must involve all of me, all that I am, all that I have, all I shall ever be. I must completely surrender to Him. Jesus is shouting, King me, King me, King me. The great battle in the Christian life is over the lordship of Christ. The great battle in the Christian life is that we want to be king over something. And here's what God does. God keeps revealing parts in our lives that He is not Lord over. Here's another spot. Can't I just keep that spot for a couple days, Lord? Can't I just have that for a while? You know, when I was 14 years old, I became a believer. 38 years ago Friday. This past Friday, I became a follower of Christ. And shortly thereafter, I said, God, whatever you want me to do in my life, I surrendered my life. But then what happens is your life gets stuff in it. You know, you meet a beautiful girl and you have a wonderful relationship with her, and then the Lord goes, I'd like you to surrender that to me. That? Now, I'm okay with a lot of this other stuff, but that? Okay, we'll surrender that. And then you have goals and desires and plans for your life, and God says, I'd like you to surrender that. Oh, that? All of that? You want all of that? And then you know, you're someplace in ministry, you're enjoying ministry, and it's nice in the South, and God says, well, I'd like you to do something else. You go, well, I'm serving you here. Is there a problem? God keeps, you have kids. God says, I'd like you to surrender the kids. I'd like to kill them, God, but if you want me to surrender them, I'll give them to you. Take them, take them. All of life is learning more what I need to surrender to. Doesn't end with I surrender all. It's I surrender all, and then I surrender all again, and I surrender all again, and I surrender all again. So that's dedicate myself. I must first of all anticipate God's work, and then I must dedicate myself to what God is doing. And then there's the input through the Holy Scriptures. I say Holy Scriptures, let me just make it simple for you. The Bible. I must put the Bible in my life. I'll never forget, I was counseling with someone one time, and they were having a terrible, terrible time. Things were a real mess. So I said, let me suggest something. You really need to get into the Bible. you need to just spend a little time reading the Bible. I'm not talking about spending years and months. I'm saying just a little bit of the Bible a day is going to start you off right, because things are a mess. The individual said, I really don't like to read. I said, well, they make it now in audio form. You could listen to it. I just don't like to sit and listen. And this is a true statement. I said to him next, I said, well, it's on DVD. You can sit and watch the whole thing on DVD. And I was about to whip out some addresses. I just don't want to sit and do that. So I said to the individual the following thing. I said, so what you want God to do is make another way to fix you other than the Bible. That's what you'd like to do? And they actually said yes. God doesn't do that. God is designed that he has spoken. Now, what I'm going to say is going to get me in trouble, but it's true. We are all looking for a word from God. God, speak to me. And what's coming back is, it has been written. You don't need a new word. Read the old word. Read the old word. I don't need a new word. I need to read the old word. The properties of Scripture are found in 2 Timothy 3:16, where it says, all Scripture is God, or is breathed out by God. It is the words of God. Today, if you will go home and read your Bible for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes, you will have heard from God. You will have heard from God. It will be better than God shouting or writing in the clouds, because you don't know if that's God or you or the pizza you had. You will have heard from God if you will read it. I remember a teacher I had in school who was a new Christian when I was in high school, and some folks were with him in a parking lot, and a flyer blew by. And he picked up the flyer. It was about a yard sale at a church. And he said, the Lord is talking to me about going to a yard sale at the church. No, it blew by and you picked it up. He was talking to you about picking up litter and throwing it away. We cannot live that way. We cannot live with, I think you have a sure word. Oh, but it's so hard to read it. I know it. As 90% of illumination is perspiration, but I must read it. I must read it. And when I read it, it is God-breathed. It's the words of God. Each and every part is God-breathed, his words. And here's the profit of Scripture. It's profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness. It is profitable, it is beneficial, it is useful in the area of doctrine, what to believe. In the area of reproof, what not to believe. In the area of correction, restoring someone. In the area of instruction, disciplining or helping someone not get in trouble. The Bible is useful in all those arenas. You want to know how to have relationships that work? The Bible answers that question. You want to know how to have a business that works? The Bible answers that question. You want to know how to have a marriage that works? The Bible says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Novel idea, but biblical. The Bible says, wives, submit to your husbands. If you want me to make it more palatable, respect your husbands. Those are truths that if we hold on to, they make a huge difference. If we ignore them at our peril. The Scriptures have told us what we are to do. The purpose of the Scriptures is that the man of God may be competent, equipped for every good work. The man or woman of God may be competent, may be perfect, equipped for every good work, able to meet all challenges, totally furnished, equipped for every good work. Psalm 119 addresses this issue. In verses 9 through 11, where it says, how can a young man keep his way pure? By guarding it according to your word. With my whole heart I seek you. Let me not wander from your commandment. I have stored up your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. I don't know, Pastor. When I read the Bible, some of the things I read make me uncomfortable. Just some of them? I don't like what it tells me to do. I don't like all that it tells me to do. It's not about whether I like it or not. If I will listen to it, I will be wise and I will be where I'm supposed to be. So I need to saturate myself with the owner's manual. Can I ask you a question? How many of you own cars? How many of you have actually read the owner's manual? Let me tell you when you read the owner's manual, when you get in trouble. When do people read the Bible? That's right. That's right. You'll find them in the corner. Must be an answer here somewhere. Let me go to the index. It's true, right? Preventative care is just as good, though, isn't it? Or better. Or better. Or better. 2 more points and we're done today. Secondly, or fourthly, is the influence from other believers. We all add to one another in this thing called the body of Christ. Ephesians 4:16 says, from whom, and it's speaking of Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. Here is this reality. You and I all bring something to the table in the body of Christ that's necessary, that's important, that's needed. This is going to be life-changing for some of you. You don't come to church to hear me. If you come to church to hear somebody speak, you're missing the reason for church. Because we're going to put this thing on the internet. Thanks to Phil, we'll be on tonight by like 10. All this will be on the internet. Why then do we come? Because you add something to the body of Christ by your presence here. Some of you have had some really, a great week, right? You know, you came in, zippity-doo-dah, zippity-day. You know, it's been a great week for you. Maybe nobody here. You've had a good week. But there are people here who've had a bad week, and they need some of your good week to spill on them. Some of you did well financially over the last few months. Must have bought gold. And there are some people who have need that you could reach out and touch. The purpose is not to hear the preacher or to sing the songs. Those two things, the preacher and the songs, should encourage us and motivate us and instruct us, and they're parts of worship. But then, we're here to interact with one another. And then that goes on throughout the week because we need each other. We need each other. We can all stir up each other in the body of Christ. Hebrews 10:24 and 25 says, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day, that is the return of Christ, drawing near. We have this obligation to stir each other up, to love one another, to be there for one another. Sometimes you'll hear people say, no, I didn't get anything out of the service. It'd probably be wise not to tell me that. Don't say that in my presence. Because it's really not about what you got out of what we said or what we sang. It's about your interaction with one another. It's about your reaching out and your stirring up one another. I love a couple of scriptures in this regard. Just take a second, and if you have a Bible, turn to the book of Galatians, the 6th chapter and the 2nd verse. I love holding a Bible in my hand, but you can't get the font any bigger on these when you press on them. I don't know what it is. But Galatians, the 6th chapter, and the 2nd verse speaks very powerfully to what we're supposed to be doing. It says, bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. One of the things we are to do is to bear each other's burdens. That requires two things. One of them is that we're open that we're not perfect, and we have burdens. And then number two, that we're not too selfish to help people with what they're going through. If you turn a few books over to the book of Thessalonians, the 5th chapter, 1 Thess 5, it tells us in the 11th verse of 1 Thessalonians 5 to encourage one another and build one another up just as you are doing. And then in verse 14 of that same chapter, it says, we urge you, brothers, admonish or warn the idle. It's talking about people who wouldn't go to work, who said, well, the church should pay for us because we're real spiritual, waiting for Jesus to come. Here it says, warn those people. But look what else it says. Admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted or the little-souled. People overwhelmed with life and what's happening in life, what should we do? Admonish them, encourage them, help them. And then it says to do something else. It says to help the weak. Literally, the word there is to hold on, and the word weak there is those who are struggling with moral issues. So in the church, we don't gather the weak-souled, the disobedient, and those struggling with problems and take them out back and shoot them. This is not a haven for the holy. It's a hospital for the hurting. What we do is we put our arms around each other, knowing that at some point we're going to have a problem similar, and we help each other. It's not gotcha. Oh, you have a problem with sin. Oh, let's pray about it. Come on over here. So-and-so's got a problem with pornography. Let's all pray. It's not that way. We need each other in this whole area of transformation. Proverbs 27:17 says, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. The picture here is that we are to participate with other Christ followers. We're to get involved with them for the sake of spiritual transformation. And finally, there is the interaction with the trials of life. These 5 things are the components, and we'll review them in a second. But note God's painful prescription. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Note that it does not say, if you meet trials. What does it say? When you meet trials. One of God's greatest tools in helping you and I transform is trials, is difficult times. And our response to these trials needs to be to count it foolish joy. Trials sometimes can make you bitter, but you and I must respond in a joyful way so that they can make us better. And what is the chance of you being in a trial? 100%. There are 3 types of people in this room today. People who are about to go into trouble, people in trouble, and people who just came out of trouble. And that's the way it always is. So I must count it all joy. The reason for the trials is it tests my faith and produces in me perseverance or steadfastness, and I need this steadfastness to be perfect, to be complete, to lack nothing. You see, without perseverance, I am lacking. I need the trials to produce in my life endurance so I'm not lacking. Do I want the trials? No. I remember somebody I was talking to one time said, I know God will not give you more than you can handle, but I'm pretty sure He's confused me with somebody else. Here's our powerful perspective. But he knows the way that I take. When he has tried me, how am I going to come forth? As gold. But does that mean I like it? No. But I'm counting it all what? Joy. It's hard when you're a young Christian to understand that trials are a part of the Christian experience. You don't want to think that way. You want a bed of roses. I'll never forget a short time after I came to Christ, the guy who led me to Christ was a tremendous individual. I owe him everything. He discipled me. He took a lot of time with me. I don't know where I'd be without him. But he had to move, and he physically, with friends, built a house. He put in a very nice basement, and then he had to leave for educational reasons for the summer, leave his family behind and go away for the summer. And it was a very stressful time in his life, but he held up well, and I was admiring him for how he held up. And 2 days before he left for the summer, the rains came. And they came, and they came. And his new foundation had some sort of problem in it and began to spike holes like a dike. And all throughout the basement of his brand new house, water was running in, kind of like faucets, everywhere. And he needed to leave. He freaked out. God, why are you doing this to me? God, I love you. God, I'm trying to serve you. I'm trying to do the best. And then you let all this happen. What are you doing? Well, he came to his senses, thank God, and went away, and a group of us fixed his house. But here's the reality. You've wanted to do that. Here's the reality. Some of you have done it. I've done it. I don't like trials. I don't like difficult times. I'm like a pig during trials. Stick me and I oink. I don't like it, but it's part of God's process. It's part of God's process. The best thing for me and you to do is to cooperate with the perfecting work of trials. Why? Because you're going to learn the lesson. And God is greatly patient, isn't he? If you don't learn it the first time, you get to go through it again. You don't pick it up the second time? Again. You don't pick it up the third time? No problem. We'll repeat the class just for you. These 5 simple components. The intervention by the living God. Anticipate that God's going to be at work in your life. So as you leave here today, what's happening to you is not accidental. It's God designed to help you to become like Christ. From the person who cut you off on the expressway to the smelly person in line at the soup man. Secondly, the involvement of the whole person. Dedicate. Surrender yourself to God. Present yourself to Him. The input through the Holy Scriptures. Saturate. You cannot know the Bible too well and its truths too fully. The influence from other believers. Participate. Share. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. And the interaction with the trials of life. Cooperate. Cooperate with what God is doing. What's to you? What would God have you to do with what He said to you today? Let's pray. Lord, these truths are so powerful, so real. Help us, Lord, to hear them and obey them, apply them. Lord, help us this day to know that as we walk out of here, you're intervening, you're involved in our spiritual growth. Lord, help us to cooperate by involving all of ourselves in you. Lord, help us to read your word and apply it. Help us, Lord, to interact with one another, to experience the influence of other believers, and help us, Lord, to interact with the trials of life. Help us to cooperate with what you're doing in us. Lord, as you do these things, we'll be sure to give you the honor the glory, and the praise. In Jesus' name, amen. I'm going to ask us all to just stand for a moment. Jonathan's going to play. I have some counselors. I'm going to ask them to come forward. They're going to stand here at the front. And if you need to pray with someone because something's going on in your life or something's happening, these folks are available for you. We're not going to have a long invitation today, but we just invite you to come, pray with someone, talk with someone as the music plays before we close our service.
When peace